forward to his book, Micheál O'Muircheartaigh, My Life and Times, has, and is one of the few people who has entered the subconscious of the nation through his voice, the voice that was so much part of Irish broadcasting, and I know that there are many friends from the broadcasting world here, the voice that was part of the GAA, and I know again that there is a very wide representation from GAA boards from around the country, and so there should be, and also the voice of racing, and I know that there are many racing friends who are here. And I was struck in his book, My Life and Times, that I had just had a brief opportunity to glimpse at this afternoon, that he refers particularly to 1984, the centenary year of the GAA, and he regrets that there wasn't a replay that year, because if there had been, it would have meant that he would have been commenting at his 100th All-Ireland final.
Tommy Drum under pressure. Oh, dear, the captain went so wrong. And the bomber, this is Jack Power, and this is Jack O'Shea, and it's over the bar. And there goes Sam from Paddy to Ambrose.
Arkle and Flying Wilder together. Arkle jumps it in for Flying Wilder's fallen. Arkle is now clear as they turn now to the last fence. Flying Wilder faller at the second last, turning now to the final fence, and it's Arkle cleared of Great Rakes and Volsey. One fence to go, and it's Arkle cleared of Great Rakes, and coming up now, and just listen to this crowd rise to this winner. And here he comes, Arkle, a pat tap, really pushing him out to say, there you are, there's Arkle, and there he is. Arkle and Height of Fashion together. And it's Arkle just the leader. And in the race home now it's Arkle. Arkle and Height of Fashion, very little between them. And Pat Tap pushing Arkle out. Height of Fashion trying to bear him down on him. But racing down now at 50 yards to go, it's Arkle. And coming down to the finishing post, it is Arkle. Yes, he's won, and there he goes. The undisputed champion.
And 3 walking up into stall number 1. All seems well now. All jockey's eyes on the starter. In a moment he'll press the button and they'll be off. That is, all with the exception of Linden Tree. Look at him there, turning round to the left. No intention whatsoever of following the remainder of the horses. The favourite is out of it.
With less than a furlong to go now, it's Irish Ball. Lombardo's coming after him. Guillemot is coming after him. They're not going to catch him. They're coming to the finish now, and it's Irish Ball the winner. Lombardo and Guillemot second and third with a furlong to go. Millreef is in front, and as they race down to the finish now, it's Millreef and Pistol Packer. They've got 50 yards to race. It's Millreef, Pistol Packer, and Camprisi are coming after. But as they go past the post, Millreef has won.
And as they race to the final furlong, Steel Pulse and Scottish Rifle neck and neck. Lifeguard make it round quickly on the inside. But as they race to the finish now, it's Steel Pulse with 100 yards to go. It's Steel Pulse on the near side. And as they race up to the finish, that's Steel Pulse the winner.
He was a legend in his lifetime, and he was a very kind man. He was very good to me, especially in my early days. He was a personal friend of my late father's, and he was just a larger-than-life character. His voice will go down for decades. He was just a wonderful man.
As has been well reported, he never said a bad word about anybody. He tried to bring out everybody's positive points. He tried to make everybody seem to be even better than they were, and that's how he made the sports he was involved in so popular.
A truly great man, a truly great honour to have known him. Very supportive to young people especially. I have fantastic memories of the man. I don't think anyone ever said a bad word about him. I was privileged enough to meet him a couple of years ago in Killarney and have a very pleasant conversation, reminiscing with him about the old times. A legend, a legend.
Well, in my younger riding days, you know, there were only 2 commentators in England and Ireland. And they were Micheál O'Muircheartaigh and Peter O'Sullivan. And they were streets ahead of anybody else. When we needed somebody over there, Micheál O'Muircheartaigh was always the one that came over. And, you know, he was so good that, you know, him and Peter O'Sullivan did all the big races.
They're racing down to the furlong post now, and Altesse Royale is just the leader. Vincent along the inside. It's Altesse Royale now coming on, and Vincent coming after on the inside. They've got less than 50 yards to go now as they race down to the finish. It's Altesse Royale just going to get there. He's coming down to the finish. Altesse Royale is going to win. Altesse Royale has won from Vincent, and as they come within 50 yards of the winning post, watch Vincent along the inside as she jumps the shadow, and racing down to the finish now, it is Altesse Royale, the winner of the Oaks from Vincent, with Lavandula Rose third.
In fact, at one time, about 40 years ago, of course this was well before the days of modern technology, the BBC insisted that any commentator had to have a race reader. And I don't know how it came about that that I'd been asked to do a commentary, and Michael was actually on the sidelines, but I was asked who I'd like to race read, and I said, well, naturally I'd like Micheál O'Muircheartaigh, because to me he's always been the absolute best. And I always remember, and he keeps reminding me of it too, that he came up onto the rostrum. We used to have sort of open scaffolds in those days, and he said, don't worry, I won't say anything.
It is Castle Falls with Princeville, Capino, Rondetto, Rutherford's along the inside, the Foss and Northerner, then the Kirtle Lad and Greek Scholar together, and here they are at Beechers and over Beechers. The loose horse is over in front. He doesn't seem to interfere with any. Rutherford's lost a bit of ground there, but he's all right, and they're turning out of the fence after Beechers, and as they do, the leader is Castle Falls, with Rutherford's along the inside, and Rutherford has been hampered, and so has Castle Falls. Rondetto has fallen, Princeville has fallen, Norther has fallen, Kirtle Lad has fallen, the Fossa has fallen. There's a right pile up. Leesy has climbed over the fence and left his jockey there, and now with all this mayhem, Foynaven has gone off on his own. He's about 50, 100 yards in front of everything else.
Foynaven, the unconsidered outsider, and John Buckingham holding Josh Gifford on Hehir. Then comes Greek Scholar and Red Alligator. They're racing up towards the line now, and it's Foynaven who missed that melee at Beechers, going well clear to a fantastic Grand National triumph. Hehir is second, Red Alligator's coming up to be third, and at the line, John Buckingham looks over his shoulder, sees there's no danger, ears pricked, Foynaven wins the National.
I thought that was, in broadcasting terms, an absolute miracle of quick identification. I don't think anybody who hasn't tried to describe the action in a race can realize how absolutely brilliant that was. How you can think of what's happening, it can run through your head, but to actually translate it, to get it out as he did, I can practically remember every word that he said in that incident.
It was a little bit of luck too, because I have a habit before the National, being in the weigh room, looking at all the jockeys weighing out. Yes. And I have memorized colours for the 6 weeks before that, and I kind of checked them off in my mind. And I saw this fellow with a black jacket and a yellow and red braces on him. I said, he's not on my list. And I went over and said, Johnny, what's that? He said, oh, this is Foynaven, he said. But I said to him, at Cheltenham, that wore light green and dark green quartered. Oh, yes, he says, the owner thought the green was unlucky, and he's going to try it with these colours today. Now, if I hadn't been in the spot at the time and saw him, I'd be wondering, what the hell's that thing in black coming over 100 yards behind everything else?
One horse, because what astonished me about that is how quickly you twigged who it was.
That was it, you know. And another part, I was looking at the loose horse, yes, who was on the inside, and he went over in front of Rutherford's and took everything else with him. Now, I could just as easily have been looking back to see what was behind. And if I looked back and then came round to the fence and saw all these on the ground, I kind of say, where do they come from, and what's this all about?
Mind you, I think Michael was usually genuinely excited, and he used to spice his involvement with a little personal interest.
Here comes Law Society on the outside. They're inside the final furlong. It's Theatrical and Law Society. They're racing inside the final furlong, and Law Society has gone on. Law Society is the winner. Theatrical is second. Dermot Weld is third. Infantry is fourth.
One of the many attributes of Micheál O'Muircheartaigh, I thought, was his ability to adapt to a given situation to the total exclusion of other things. I saw many examples here in Croke Park and Patrick's Days whereby he'd do the first game, he'd be totally wrapped up, we'll say, in a hurling Railway Cup final, and now later he'd be out at Baldoyle for the start of the flat racing season. Again, totally enraptured in that. And I'd say it was that attribute that enabled him to give that terrific commentary on the funeral of John F. Kennedy on a cold and crisp November day in the year 1963.
little John passing over to have a word with Caroline. Caroline, the 6-year-old, who may well at that tender age have a grasp of just what is really happening today, but it's very obvious that little John has no idea whatever. General de Gaulle just comes down the steps, and close behind him, President de Valera, his son Major Vivian, and also Mr. Matthew McCluskey, the American ambassador to Ireland. Still, the sun beaming down. Still, that glistening of light from the roofs of the limousine. Still, that tempering breeze. And still, the long, long lines of people lining every foot of the way. Was standing beside the grave now, in the green uniform and the white facings of the military school of the Curragh, the lads of the 37th year of the military college, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Cyril Mattimo, who had under the command of Lieutenant Frank Copley. And so on this hillside, on this cemetery in Arlington, this final chapter in the earthly story of John Fitzgerald Kennedy is being told. And as the cadets from the Curragh give final military honors, one can see the statesman of the world on the fringe of the graveside area. John Fitzgerald Kennedy has been laid to rest. Eriesh Day Goreva Anam.
Always what struck me about the man was his humanity, in that he never mentioned players if they were hurt. He tried to play it down, because he was always conscious, I think at least, of the parents at home who would be worried about their young fellas playing. And the other thing was, when you hear him saying, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, you knew that somebody had got a clip that he wasn't going to talk about. He said, we'll continue with the play and let them sort it out themselves, you know. But you always knew when you were saying, oh, I'd love to be there, I wonder what has actually happened. And we never knew, of course, because Micheál would never divulge unless you talked to somebody afterwards.
Not only, of course, did he enthrall people at home in Ireland, but Irish people everywhere abroad listened with such interest to his broadcasts. And a lot of people remember him listing, and he did it with great pride at the start of the All-Ireland semi-finals and All-Ireland finals, that we were being listened to by Radio Brazzaville, and he listed the various places all over the world.
Even though occasions became big and trimmings and extravaganza and all that expanded, to Micheál O'Muircheartaigh always, the player was the important thing. Whether it was the first round or the final, All-Ireland football or hurling, camogie or anything, the occasion in hand and the people participating, they were the real people for him at that moment.
Yeah, Micheál O'Muircheartaigh, as he says in the book, his father Jim was very involved. First of all, he trained the Clare team that won the All-Ireland before, way back in the early part of the century. He was a Clare man, he trained that team. He also trained the Leitrim football team in the 20s, and Michael played hurling for Vincent's, and he played hurling for UCD. He was never a great football man, although he was a fabulous commentator on football, but hurling, as he suggests himself in the book, was his first love.
Over a career that stretched from 38 to 85, Micheál did many and wonderful things for and with Gaelic games. And I suppose we should always mention that wonderful final in New York in 1947.
I felt a responsibility that I've never felt before or since of being a major link at a time when a broadcast from a telephone call from the United States was something unusual. That atmosphere and that feeling of being the link with home and the biggest game we know, it really, well, it made it very important.
Back came Kerry, and Garvey, in one of his many solo runs, outpaced the defence and sent in a hard goal. With the score then, Kerry 1-1, Cavan no score. The clearance by Johan paves the way for a Garvey solo, and yet another Kerry goal. First, Dan O'Keefe saves the hard one from Donoghue at the expense of a point. Then Stafford finishes the Higgins shot to the net. Cavan are indeed jubilant now, but more is to come. And as Higgins works his way through into a position for another goal, resurgent Cavan takes the lead. For it was only a matter of seconds until referee Martin O'Neill blew his final whistle. And so ended the All-Ireland final of 1947 with Cavan the champion. The crowd came out to cheer off their hero. And with Cavan glorious and happy in victory, and Kerry brilliant in defeat, the greatest chapter in Irish sporting history came to an end.
No matter what we say by way of adulation or praise or appreciation, it's not adequate to cover what he did, particularly his ability, and this was referred to by several people tonight, of producing a word picture.
It's a sad part and it was a joyous part, because we had this big launch 2 weeks before he died of Micheál O'Muircheartaigh, His Life and Times, the book that was his autobiography. We had a fabulous night. In the end, you had 760 people at a marvellous turnout in the Burlington Hotel. And there was a fabulous parade of players, and as they all waved up to him as he sat on the stage with his family, he really was excited about that.
Finally, I suppose, as we look back on his great career, you could say that Micheál O'Muircheartaigh will be remembered long and very pleasantly, because whenever there's a Gaelic football match being broadcast, or a hurling match, or a race meeting, the memories of Micheál O'Muircheartaigh will be very fond and very affectionate.
Referee has blown the whistle and the game is over.
It's left in the card there. Piggott in the windshield. Now in the grave, Gullier.